sort of like on the main camera.
Okay.
Yeah. Just a little bit more.
30 more seconds.
30 more seconds. We're having problems with the link or something.
You are with me.
Maybe it's just Sunday morning.
Easy like Sunday morning.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll start letting people in.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Barbara.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Good Sunday morning. We'll wait a few more minutes to let more people come in. But good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ian. Been a long time. Good to see you. Barbara as well. DK, nice to see you as well. We'll get started since we're on time, but I'll let more people in as they're joining. So as all three of you know, I'm Pascal and
I'm Elaine.
we're co-founders of Nectara.
Yep.
And we're happy today to host Krista Ovanel today with us, talking about a very important and often forgotten topic of life and death. And one of the reasons why we wanted to bring this up today is that our interface with life is really how we interface with life. And Krista, especially, we met Krista around 6 months ago through our friend David. And we've been on a journey of understanding our own immortality and also planning for our own death with Krista, which has been very powerful, very impactful work for us to go through. And it's often a topic that doesn't get discussed a lot in the healing spaces to talk about death. It's a topic that is often taboo in Western society. And when we started the process of working with Krista, we realized just how little we had spoken about death within each other and in our relationship, in our families. And we found that to be such a powerful, transformative, new boundaries to explore with Krista. And so we're really thrilled to have her here today. And Krista, would you like to give a little intro? And I also want to acknowledge that we're calling from the West Kootenays, the ancestral lands of the Ktunaxa people and the Sinite people. Yeah. And I'm really honored to be hosted on their lands. So Krista, would you like to?
Pascal, thank you so much. And friends, we are a small group. If you'd like to turn on cameras, that's just fine. It is Sunday morning, so I know that maybe a few folks are still in pajamas. That's okay. But I am also hoping that this is a little less one way and that we'll have some opportunity for dialogue too. So please just settle in however you are is perfectly fine. Thank you for your beautiful acknowledgement. I'm actually here in East Vancouver. So this is the traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, which are the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish peoples. And they have stewarded this land for time immemorial, really. And I'm so grateful to be here. I love the work that I do. And one of the things that I love so much is the opportunity to meet with people in this incredibly soulful way, like I met with Pascal and Elaine. And we're so far away. We did everything by Zoom, and yet I feel like maybe it's just because I have no boundaries. Who knows? But I feel like I actually make really beautiful friendships when I do this work with people, because it is intimate and caring work, and it's this incredible opportunity to go deep on things that so few of us really ever consider, talk about, acknowledge. It's not polite society anymore. So anyway, this is where I'm coming to you from. I wanted to begin. Is it okay with you folks if I begin with this poem that I had in mind? Okay, great. So often especially when I'm doing work with groups, I really like to begin with either a short centering meditation or a poem or something that just allows us all to get here, because I'm going to acknowledge that absolutely some of the work that I do is or some of the work that we do together and that I invite people into can be evocative. It evokes strength and power, and those things can come in different ways. They can come and kind of hammer you down like a wave, or they can come and float you up. And so I just want to allow us to get there. All right. So I'm going to read you this beautiful poem by Khalil Gibran. The book is from The Prophet, and probably it's very familiar to a bunch of you, but I just love this piece. It's called On Death. We would ask now of death. And he said, you would know the secret of death. But how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto the day cannot unveil the mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide unto the body of life. For life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond. And like seeds dreaming beneath the snow, your heart dreams of spring. Trust the dreams, for in them is hidden the gate to eternity. Your fear of death is but the trembling of the shepherd when he stands before the king, whose hand is to be laid upon him in honor. Is the shepherd not joyful beneath his trembling, that he shall wear the mark of the king? Yet is he not more mindful of his trembling? For what is it to die but to stand naked in the wind and to melt into the sun? And what is it to cease breathing but to free the breath from its restless tides, that it may rise and expand and seek God unencumbered? Only when you drink from the river of silence shall you indeed sing. And when you have reached the mountaintop, then you shall begin to climb. And when the earth shall claim your limbs, then you shall truly dance. That's Khalil Gibran on death. So
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Isn't that
Yeah.
lovely?
One of my favorite poets of all time.
Isn't it? Oh, I know. To think of the wisdom in a page and a half, it's like, okay, we're done here. The webinar's over. That's all you needed, folks. But you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to begin our time together with maybe a little bit of an exploration around the damage that's caused to us by the fact that we live in a death-denying society. All right. And with this piece, I'd love to invite you to unmute, to share. We're a small group. You can either throw your hand up, and just start talking. If you're kind of shy, you can pop something into the chat that's just down at the bottom of your screen. But here's the thing, is that when we disconnect from death, we actually we do damage to ourselves, and we do damage societally. And I want to give you an example of what I mean by this disconnection, right? Do you has anybody, and I can't see everyone, but I am going to guess that it's likely that the majority of people in our room together today have not actually ever seen a dead body. I think that that's actually pretty likely based on current trends, right? I think that it's also possible that when a death occurs, you may not have any logistical, there you go, yeah, dead pet's body, yeah. You may not have any logistical understanding of what happens next and how to care for a dead body, or if you don't wish to care for it, how someone else cares for that dead body. I'm just going to put that out there. I feel like that's pretty likely for us. And why is that, right? That's because we don't even have the language anymore. We don't integrate death into our lives. And we started this disintegration. You think about that word. We started this well over 100 years ago. And it was actually folks like me who were doing, probably we meant well, funeral directors and such, but goodness, we muscled our way in and we pushed civilians, regular folks who used to care for their dead. We just pushed them out of the way and said, we got this, we'll take care of this for you. And what we did is we moved death out of life. We moved the death, the actual physical act of death out of the homes, and we hid death, and then we hid what happens after death. And death isn't an event. Death is an experience, and it can be experienced very wholly, or it can be just something that we just completely walk away from, and we are allowed to distance ourselves from. So I would just love, I mean, even Elaine and Pascal, like, our, before we did our work together, were you fairly sure that you kind of knew what you needed to do, or what questions you needed to ask, or things like that, or did you have any clue?
Not really. I mean, like, I had some general sense, like, oh, we got a will. I think that's enough. Or, yeah, we never really talked about.
What was that?
What was that? Sounded like somebody else.
Oh, okay.
Talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Oh,
it's all good. Yeah.
That's all fine.
Well, yeah, we never really talked about what we would do in the face of death. Like, we kind of had an idea, like, okay, that's part of life, something that we'll have to go through. The thing that made us wanted to do this work with you, Krista, was really, like, for me anyway, is really like when I look at my parents and realize that they're at that age where, you know, people around their group are starting to transition, passed on, and then it made us, and then, you know, an experience in my own family about death of my uncle too, and how poorly that was handled, made me realize there's just so many things that we don't talk about, and there's just so many things that you know, we need to get in order. And of course, David spoke about you, and
that's right. Yeah.
And
well, and the thing is the reason we don't talk about it is because it's actually actively taboo. Like, I would love to ask in this group, has anyone heard the phrase passed away?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Okay, so what the hell does that mean? And by the way, we're shortening it now to past. I hear that all the time too. Does anybody have any favorites? Like, I personally love Bought the Farm. I adore that one. Well, I'm going to tell you a story. Like, this is seriously, like, damaging stuff. All right. One phrase that and if you have phrases, pop them in the chat or just unmute and, like, yell them out, because I love collecting these phrases. I got to tell you that it's not just civilians, people who don't work in death care, who can get confused by this. But when we don't use the proper language in our day-to-day to describe end of life, death, and after death care, people can truly become confused. Across the river. I mean, it's super poetic, my friend Susie, but like, to rest in the shade of the trees. That's a good one. I like biting the dust. Here's my absolute least favorite: resting.
Whoa.
Seriously, this is something that funeral homes will actually use. They have resting parlors, and they have resting rooms and things like this. Now let's just picture ourselves as children hearing that someone is resting. What is resting a synonym for? It's actually a synonym for sleeping, not for death. And can you just take a moment to think about how actually actively damaging that could be for a child to hear that kind of language and immediately be confused, right? it's not just children. I actually used to work in a funeral home, and there was a woman there, not a funeral director, but she was like the person who answered the phones and stuff, right? The receptionist. And she got a call from another funeral home who went on at length about how this person was resting in their funeral home. And she hung up the phone and she wandered in, and she was a very bright woman, but I think she was a bit overworked that day. And she said, okay, I don't know what just happened, but the guys over at Kearney's are asking us to go and send a transport for somebody who's resting with them, and I'm just not really sure what to do. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she went through the whole story, and I was like, oh, no. Basically, we have to go pick up that dead body. And she stopped in her tracks, and she was like, oh God, of course. And she kind of like, she literally gave her head a shake. When we are not willing to meet death, to even have death as a simple part of our conversation, we are not giving ourselves an opportunity to explore the gifts that death can bring, right? So let's just get on it, my friends. Let's just get on it and and use the language and speak about what matters. Because here's the thing, what matters in the end is actually what matters now. And that's something that we're going to do. I hope you got the note to bring like a pen and paper, because we actually are going to have a little bit of time to do a couple of exercises even. But I'd like to just for a couple of minutes talk about the experiences, the perspective of the uncertainty of the only certainty that we truly will ever face in our lives. All right, preparedness and the importance of living your true legacy, not your name on the wing of a building or some big fat scholarship fund or things like that. The legacy that is actually available to each and every one of us. All right. So when I say the uncertainty of certainty, what I mean here is that death is literally the one thing that we all have in common, right? And see, DK, get up here with me. That is exactly right. DK said, I've learned that death teaches us, still living, how to live a little more. I cannot amplify that message enough. When we are willing to look into the eyes of death, as it were, we can start thinking about, very much like the poet says, how we can actually embrace the life that we lead. And one of the reasons that I moved into this work was because as a funeral director, the most common question I would ever get, or the thing that I would hear most frequently when I pick up the phone at the funeral home is, hello, sometimes tears, my ex, blank, my blank has just died. My mother, my aunt, my sister, my daughter, what have you. Someone has just died. What do I do now? And let's think that through for a second. How did we get to a place societally where we literally don't know what to do next? Imagine if you needed your car broke and you needed to buy a new car. Oh, hello, puppy. Love that little tail going, Corey. And you needed to buy a new car, right? I don't think any of us would walk into the Honda dealership with our wallet open and tap the first salesperson we saw on the shoulder and say, hi, I need a new car. Which one do I need and how much will it cost? Right? People put more effort into figuring out their phone plans than they put into figuring out the only certainty that we will all ever face. Pascal, you looked like you wanted to.
I was agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And it also made me think of my own family and upbringing, where it was only when I was 41 years old that I even looked at death. And I'm curious from your perspective, having worked in this field for quite a many years, like, have things changed societally around death? What have you seen change over the
What a
last year?
beautiful question. So there's been this real shift in the last decade, and we're starting to move into um, a space, a really beautiful space of death positivity. We're just at the very beginning of it, though. It's only about 10 years old. And I am so delighted on this call to have you, Pascal, and to have Ian and Evan, DK and Terry. Terry, I think is a lady, and I briefly saw DK. I'm not remembering, but here's the reason that I say that is that what's very interesting is that, hello, it is you, Terry. One of the reason that I say that is that what's funny, super funny about the death positive movement is it is being absolutely spearheaded by women and by a feminine and feminist energy. And I'm really interested in that. But I think that this is a natural circle or pushback, if you will, because 150 years ago, we women used to be in charge of death and death care. Death used to occur in the home, and women, and believe it or not, children, were actually in charge of the death and dying. And so I was actually saying this just before other folks came on. Did you know that back then children were shielded from birth and from the birth experience and the birthing process, but they were right in there with the death experience and the death process. They were our little runners. They would be going and getting water or sending messages or assisting in ways that now, goodness gracious me, we shield the heck out of children when it comes to end of life experiences, but we're actually quite comfortable often with allowing them to understand and even witness the beginning of life experiences, right? So this huge shift at 100, it's like a total reversal. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And this is why I think we're starting to see the wheels turn and a new reversal. So in the last decade or so, we started to see the emergence. First thing that happened, well, maybe not the first thing that happened, but one important thing that happened is women started coming to school, returning to school to actually become morticians. And do you know that in the beginning, when morticians became a profession, which was only 100, 150 years ago, all men, 100% all men. And for a very long time, it was an extremely, to the point of like even highly toxic male culture of just sort of the worst elements there. And for a very long time, and like, with firefighters or like in armies and things like that, where you have like a big heavy male culture, often what will happen is there'll just be this default. Women just stay out by default because they're not recognized or welcomed, or the systems in place do not really welcome them. Well, that's still true with becoming a funeral director or a mortician. For example, the schooling can never be part-time. The apprenticeship is always a full-time apprenticeship. There's all these systemic things that actually make it more difficult for women to enter that trade. But even with those things happening, more and more women have begun to enter the trade. And as of 2014 in Canada, which is only like, what is that, 7, 8 years ago, we've actually flipped the switch, and women are now outnumbering men entering the trade, which is just amazing. I think we're going to continue to see change because of that very fundamental change. That's on the sort of legislative, legalistic, licensed side of things. In the realm of death education and death doulas and things like that, women are just like, whoo, right at the forefront of it. And the death positive movement was spearheaded largely in the States by one fellow, a guy named John Underwood, who created the Death Cafe. Many of you might have been to a death cafe. And a woman named Caitlin Doughty, a lot of people probably read her stuff, that and she actually just, honest to God, one day wrote a tweet that said, hey, I've heard of the death positive movement. I've heard of the sex positive movement. Isn't it time that we had a death positive movement? And it stuck. right? So that those are some examples, Pascal, of the kinds of change. And what you're doing right now on a Sunday morning, hi friends in my community, would you like to come and hang out on Zoom for an hour and talk about death and dying and how living an aligned life can actually being willing to face the reality of our mortality can actually help us live an aligned life? 15 years ago, we probably wouldn't have been doing that. And if we did, I don't think we would have had even 5 people coming. You know, we would have had maybe one kind of wild woman. Yeah, and Corey, you're a doula. Where are you located, Corey?
Oh, here we go. I'm
Yeah,
on my phone, so I felt very difficult to figure out how to operate
I
this.
know, I
I'm
know.
in Prince George, so I'm up in the
Ah,
north.
okay, yeah, and every doula you know is a woman, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
everyone. There
I
were a
know.
couple of men in my class when I did my certification, but you know, everyone I've kept in touch with and everyone in my community of doulas is a woman.
Yeah. When I do group classes, I am so lucky to have a single man present, right? So Evan, Ian, Pascal, thank you. Welcome. Go tell your bro friends, okay, that this is not as scary as they might think it is. But I think it's like super. That was a little bit off the cuff, but I actually genuinely think it's wonderful. I have had so many clients that are couple clients like this where the fellow is being dragged in by his ankles, and it's just so intriguing to me. I don't know, is that because women are also, closer to the birth end of things or what? But only once have I had a fellow come to me and say, my wife just won't do this, so I'm going to do it all by myself. It's just a really interesting little piece. So anyway, certainty of uncertainty. When we, I want to make sure that we have some time for the sharing piece. Oh my gosh, Barbara, how could I miss? Like, yes, Stephen Jenkinson. You know, I'm going to put someone else in the chat. This fellow is life changing for me. Frank Ostaceki. Oh my God, I just spelled it wrong. And I pressed it. Frank Ostaceki wrote the 5 Invitations, and that is a desert island book for me. If you have the opportunity to go have a look at that book, he was one of the pioneers in the American hospice movement, and oh my gosh, the 5 Invitations is some of the most beautiful reflection on legacy and on living a life that will allow you to have a peaceful death. It is just one of the finest books I've ever read, um, and Francis is a great one too. Yeah, I have a nice collection on my website of books and movies and resources and things like that. So if you want to ever go have a look there, you totally can. So the uncertainty of certainty, right? One of the really common misconceptions around death planning or end of life planning is that it's actually those two things. It's not. It's life planning. It's just another part of life planning. And so when I do this kind of planning work with folks, something that I really I take quite an, not surprisingly, I take quite an integrated approach, and I really want people to consider not just end of life and death. When death is near and certain is the phrase that you will often find in a legal document. When death is near and certain, please do these things, right? That's lovely. That's great. If you've done that, you've done something. But here's the other thing. What about infirmity? What about sudden serious illness? What about something that can happen to what about something that can happen to us that doesn't get us a hair closer to death, but radically transforms our life? Who will help us make decisions at that time if we've never considered those, if we've never made those considerations, right? And that's one of the really compelling reasons, in my opinion, to do this from a soulful and interrogative perspective. All right. So what do I mean? let's ask some questions. All right. I have two exercises that I want to introduce you to. One of them I'm going to introduce you to and let you just sort of cogitate on it. Hopefully, we can have a few minutes to just talk about the two sides of this question. And then the next one, I'm actually going to introduce you to, and I want you to do it with me, okay? Because it's like really fast, and it's something that hopefully will get you into a state of understanding around the importance of thinking about, well, I call it the most important paperwork, to tell the truth. We always think of our will and our power of attorney and maybe our representation agreement and things like that's great. That's all good and important, and yay on you if you've even done that work. But the most important paperwork is the legacy letters, the lasting messages. So, 4 questions that I like to consider in terms of starting my day and ending my day. In this group, I suspect that these questions might not be completely mind-blowing. But let me tell you, when I'm talking to a group of executives at TELUS or something like that, these questions, you can literally see their heads go like, what? I'm supposed to think like that day in and day out? For a lot of you, I think that this will be quite innate. The work that these 4 questions, I'm going to put this in the chat too. These 4 questions are part of the work done founded by 2 amazing women named Rena Lazar and Michelle Pante. They have an organization called Willow EOL. I'm a Willow educator, and so using these, this is sort of licensed material and whatnot, and so as a Willow educator, I get to kind of spread the word. But in your own just daily practice, they have some incredible tools that I can recommend wholeheartedly, many of which are free, that you can just go on and download. And we're going to do one of the exercises together today. But this first one that I just want to talk you through is around the determination of who and what matters most, and how to create and live your legacy. And what this exercise invites you to do is to think about the 2 sides of legacy. And I'm a huge believer, and I think this is key and critical for integration itself, which is the title of this talk, right? The acknowledging the 2 sides of any experience or any subject is really, really important, but something that we often struggle with because we're told sort of this feeling is okay, this feeling is not okay. Being happy, do not be sad, that kind of thing, right? So opposites are a real struggle in our day-to-day lives. And I think one of the huge reasons that death and end of life has been so easily turned into a taboo topic is because we each hold fear around our own personal legacies. So there is a beautiful set of questions that, when I'm being 100% honest, which will be right this second, I don't actually start and end every day with. But I try to, and I often manage at least once a day. And sometimes when I'm really struggling, like the other day I had this wild situation in a supermarket that was like kind of, you've heard of Karens, right? There was this wild Karen situation that was unfolding before me, and I started to get really big, and I it was really like, oh, such an awful event. And then I actually went back and I pulled on these questions. I was so proud of myself. This is a practice. And these questions are so incredibly meaningful. So I'll put them in the chat in a second, so you don't have to make copies or whatever. But the questions are, what are your hopes and fears about your legacy? So it opens with an invitation to think about the 2 sides, your hopes for legacy and your fears about legacy. And then the next question is, what do you want people to remember you for, or to remember about you? The next question is, what do you think people will remember you for? And that's the one that when I'm in a boardroom like at TELUS or whatever, that there are a lot of smug looks around the table until I get to that question. And you can tell that people are all of a sudden reminded that they may be remembered for the opposite of what they are hoping they will be remembered for. And then the last question, and I'll put it in the chat, I'll put everything in the chat, is the most important one. How does the way that you are living now align with your desired legacy?
Hey, Krista, I have a question
Yes,
around the questions.
Good.
Which is, in your experience working with clients who are maybe in a phase of their life where death is approaching, or maybe they're even in the midst of the process, how do they change relative to these questions given the context that they're approaching these questions in?
So when I'm working with actively dying people is what you're asking about?
Yeah, because the moment where someone enters that period, I imagine like they're relating to these questions completely changes by 180 degrees, because they're in the midst of having to face their own mortality in a very kind of present, real way. What have you seen from people in terms of like how they bite into life more after, or like they get a surge of energy, or maybe there's like lots of grief that holds that back? But what have you seen in terms of like the transformation of that period in terms of how they approach life after?
Okay, so if someone is facing like a critical illness that has an opportunity to come through, and there is a life after, then yes, we can manage that. When I work with folks who are and I will be completely transparent that I do a lot more of my work with people who are in active planning stages rather than active dying stages. But I do, and people gravitate towards me at the end of life often because I'm the only mortician that they know. And so they're like, oh, maybe Krista can answer this question or whatnot. So two things. When people when I work with people who are really now actively dying and in this situation where they know that their mortality is they know their mortality in a way that most of us can conceive of but don't truly integrate, right? I often hear expressions of regret, and I hear expressions of a sense of not having done enough. And I think that one of the roles, and who was it? Who's my doula friend here? Corey, yeah. I wonder if Corey also has an experience similar to this, when one of the things that we can do in end of life times is to hold space for those feelings, but also offer reassurance, and also offer an example, if you will, of enough and enoughness. Corey, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a huge part of the job of holding space is just that, is that you're not reaching in and trying to fix or remedy, that sometimes it's just what you can do is what you can do, and that's all you can do, right? And that's that is enough. It has to be.
Yeah, thank you for that, Corey. And Pascal, when I'm either working in a planning phase, so nothing on the horizon and people are not sick and that kind of thing, or another time that I get called bedside, if you will, is, and specifically because I'm so intent on the non-death work too, I will often get in front of people when they've had some life-altering illness or life-altering experience, but not a death not a close death experience. And
Mhm.
do you know the word that you use, I think, was motivation. And what I find is this enormous motivation in people's experience as they are sort of moving through whatever their life altering experience was. This idea of answering that last question, how does the way you are living now align with your desired legacy? I mean, it's any schlocky Hollywood movie, right? It's any Groundhog Day. It is this invitation to to and it's the beauty of our living selves, is that every single day we can choose how we answer that question. When I had that Karen event at the grocery store the other day, I was able to choose my response based on the answer to that question. And that's taken practice for me. I'm a bit of a hothead, I will tell you. And so, so that's taken practice for me. But I think it's like, it is one of my absolute favorite set of questions. And I really acknowledge the women who came before me and who taught me this structure at Willow EOL. It is such an inviting place to go and explore. So anyone here should definitely go and explore that. Yeah, does that answer? Does that give you a sense of where I'm?
Yes, thank you. And I, also want to honor what you said earlier around like this sense of attachment to life and how much suffering it actually creates. Like for me, like doing the death planning with you was, I cried like a baby at some point because I was realizing that how I hold on to my life was affecting almost everything. And so this idea of like psychedelic wellness or psychedelic integration, I feel like it's a deep well of like wisdom, and a deep well of healing for people to really explore their own attachment to things needing to be a certain way, or like being attached to outcomes that are physically impossible. And there's so much of that to bring out to life. So I just want to say thank you for bringing those questions up. And they're quite deep, and they can offer a lot of light in places where there's usually not a lot of light. So
it can be quite dark. No, thank you for that, Pascal. And thank you actually for saying that out loud about the crying like a baby piece. I laugh sometimes, like people say, what do you do for a living? And I'll say, oh, I make grown men cry. And I do, like, a lot. When what my tagline is actually be brave, be honest, and be ready. And that there is no mistake that brave is the first one, because this work, even just getting up and getting out of your pajamas on Sunday morning and coming to something like this, there is a bravery in that act of being willing to sit in a space where we're talking about the one of the ultimate a word that we have literally, as I mentioned before, tried to erase from our collective societal vocabulary. So yeah, thank you for your bravery. Do you guys remember, this is the exercise part, we're going to actually, and we'll sort of wrap shortly after this, but do folks here remember back, it was like 2018 or something, it was like January 2018, so pre-pandemic, life was different, and it was actually in the state of Hawaii, and it was like early mid-January, I believe. This is a dead true story, and you might actually remember the implications of this. People's cell phones received an incoming emergency response. Do you remember that? Yeah, there was this incoming emergency response, and it said there is a nuclear attack that has been launched, and attack is imminent. And it gave some number of minutes. I think it was like 12 minutes or 18 minutes or something like that. And then it ended with, "This is not a drill." And the entire, like, basically a lot of people lost their jobs over this. Okay. But the reason that I bring this up is that when we are in an experience of sudden knowledge of the imminence of our mortality, God, we can like lift cars off babies, right? And basically what happened here was that went out. Almost every adult, almost every person in Hawaii has a cell phone. And so all at once, simultaneously, nearly the entire population of an entire state was told that they are going to die in X number of minutes. And you know what happened after that? Is the entire communications system went down on the island. And um, there that's why a lot of people's lost their jobs too, because that's a very dangerous thing when an entire communication infrastructure goes down. That puts a lot of people at risk. So this was actually a very dangerous moment. And why did the communication system go down? Because literally everyone in that exact moment knew who they needed to speak to and what they needed to say. And for most of us, moving through our lives, busy and active and thinking about ourselves and thinking about all the stuff that we've got to do and all the stuff that we have, we don't necessarily make time for those messages of love and of legacy. And when I was, and I love that example of what happened in Hawaii, because it shows, and in a small state, but nonetheless an entire state, right? These people knew what they needed to say, and they attempted in that exact moment to go and say it. And what I just love, when I was doing a master's degree a decade ago or something, I had this really wise prof who talked me off the ledge a whole bunch of times. And she said, Krista, don't get it right, get it written. And that got me through. And that is what I would like. This exercise is also based on a willow exercise, but it's adapted by me. But it's based on another willow exercise. And I really have a bit of a mantra around something is always better than nothing in this realm. And so many of us have done nothing, no aspects, no elements of any end of life, or as I like to call it, life planning. And so something is better than nothing. And in this 5-minute exercise, I'm going to put, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bunch of questions in the chat. And after I go through them, I'm just going to invite everyone to turn off their screens and pick up that pen and paper that you brought with you and pick one person and one question. And together, we're going to spend 5 minutes. And you're going to see just how easy it is to not worry, to just put down the worry of getting it right and pick up the ability to just get it written. I did this, Pascal, to your question, I did this exercise not long ago with a beautiful woman in not the active stages of dying, but in her 4th stage of her cancer journey, and definitely very aware of the fact that she has months or maybe a bit longer to live. And she told me that she was afraid of some aspects of the work that we did together, because she was worried that when she finished it, it would be like a message to the universe that she was ready to go, and she didn't feel ready to go yet. And I said, well, the great news is that you're actually never going to be finished, right? And something is better than nothing. So you can put down that fear. When you see the questions in a second, the rest of the story will make sense. She had such a deeply loving relationship with her mother, and she was really excited about the possibility of sort of leaving a message for her mom. And then when she saw these questions, she actually switched, and I could see it. Well, I could see when she read the question, she switched to a different question and a different person. And when you read these, or when I read them to you, I'm going to invite you to listen for the question maybe that is the most difficult to answer, and to go with that one. Especially if you're trained in this and you've done things like this all the time, give yourself a bit of a stretch. But if not, just pick one person and pick one question, and we'll spend 5 minutes together. So I'll read them and then I'll put them in the chat, okay? So the 5 questions are, or the 5 starter points are: thank you for. What I love or appreciate about you is the ways you enhance my life include: I forgive you for. Please forgive me for. Or my hopes and dreams for you are. I'm going to put it in the chat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make Pascal set the timer for 5 minutes. Please, most of you have your screen off, so half of you have your screen off. I'll turn mine off just to show you. And just let's be in silence for 5 minutes.
And to clarify, you're picking one question to answer these questions too,
One
right?
question and one person.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a person that you would like to send a message to and pick one of these to send to them. There we are, friends. So one of the reasons that I love this exercise so much is it's kind of like eating dessert first. It can fill you up. It's really it's exciting to know that you can actually carve 5 minutes out in your day to leave a message of love, of wisdom, of kindness, of gentleness, of goodness. My my friend slash client that, again, terrible boundaries, I know, but how can you not, right? When you work so closely with people. She actually told me that what she was going to do was go buy, just like from the dollar store, a package of cards like these, and just once a week go through. And she had like brother, dad, her mom that she and stepdad, and then like 4 friends, and she was like, they usually come in packages of 8, and she was just going to do one a week and tuck them in with her things. And I love that idea. And she wasn't scared of it anymore because she saw the incredible, intense beauty of that enormously simple but important act. So I know we have just a few minutes, and I would, before we sign off together, which I would like to do together, I would just love to ask if anyone has anything that is stirred or has come up for them or that they would like to share. My little Sunday morning quiet group. That's just fine. That's just fine.
I can share from my experience. I was
sure.
trying to, yeah. When we did this exercise during the death planning work we did with you, I was in that mind state of, okay, I'm in pretending that I'm going to be dying soon when I'm answering these questions. And that was another one where I cried again. Well done, Krista. Because I was thinking of my son. And I picked the question, my hopes and dreams for you are. And it brought me into that space of thinking around legacy, and what are my highest hopes for him. Let's say I was, in my deathbed and I was, sharing that with him. It was very, very powerful to be in that context of answering the question when I'm about to pass or, go to rest or
have a sleep.
Yeah, so the questions, like the what I love about them is that they're so simple, but when you place yourself in that context of like, this is something I'm leaving behind as a love note or a love message, it changes the whole experience. And it was deeply powerful for me. So again, thank you for that.
Yeah, Krista, I like to share too, like when these questions came up in our exercise together, I immediately had names for each and every one of them. So that, like each and every question, I'm like, oh, this is for Noah. This is for my parents. This is for Pascal. This is for my brother. This is for my best friend. And it's like 5 minutes is just not enough.
But it can be. And when it needs to be, it can be,
Yeah.
I'll share that when I I'd done some similar things in my little legacy planning for my kids and whatnot. My 2 are adults now, and I actually agree. 5 minutes can sometimes be so fast, but if I let myself expand, I won't actually finish. And so I just like force that sort of really short, tight 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, just like good enough. But I'm like a youngest child, and I'm a big believer in good enough rather than perfection. Anyway, that said, that you can always add to it, and that's what I do. And so I have some friends who are fabulous examples. They do like an annual letter. I don't, but I have added probably 3 times over 5 years to the first letter that I ever wrote, and it doesn't even have to be cohesive. I just it's a whole separate thing, and I just start it, add it, slip it in, and it's still, you know what, something is better than nothing, and a huge motto of mine. So.
I'll very quickly share before we sign off, if that's okay. As a recipient,
please, yes.
So 7 years ago, my partner died unexpectedly, very young, and very suddenly. And just about a week before he died, he sent me just like a little audio recording. He was just thinking about me, and we were in different cities for a couple of weeks, and he was, yeah. So he just sent me like this little MP4, and I've just kept it ever since. And I don't listen to it all the time, but to have it, and when sort of July rolls around and the anniversary of his death rolls around, it's enormously comforting to have this very small little piece of him, the sound of his voice, the reminder that he was thinking about me. And given that he was 48 when he died and had done no planning at all, it really grounded me in a time that was extremely turbulent in the aftermath.
See, that I love that you bring up that turbulence, because I often say I want people to remember, I love that. I want people to remember that when any of this documentation will need to be accessed, like whether we're talking about the will or the heart will, our lives have turned upside down. And so something is better than nothing, because our lives are upside down, and we will need to hang on very tightly. So just remember that turbulence can be calmed a little bit by doing even just a little bit of this work. So and necessary, felt deeply yet surprisingly necessary in those 5 minutes. What a beautiful thing to share, DK. Thank you for that. I'm going to put in the chat, you can find me at deathsapprentice.ca to continue conversations like these. I would love to do something called a chatterfall for us to finish. A one-word checkout. Do not press enter until I say so. It's a way for us to just be together. But the word that I'm going to just ask you to think about is what you're going to take forward into your day today. It can be from this hour that we've spent together, or it can just be something that is something that you had every intention of taking into the day already. But just a moment of popping that in the chat. Do not press enter. And when you're ready, just give me the thumbs up. I'll look at the people who I can see. All right. And then we'll press enter together. We'll get our little poem, and we'll go into our world to start our day together. Pascal, don't write anything.
It was Elaine.
It was me. It was my fingers doing it.
Okay, I've got a thumb up from one of you. So good, Evan and Barbara. Ian's ready. Okay, Terry's ready. Well, that's the majority of us. You guys are ready? Okay, so on 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness. Emergence, joyful and trust, grace, contact, gratitude, purpose, and patience. What a beautiful poem. And love. And love. What a beautiful poem to take with us into the world today. I am so grateful that you spent this hour with me. And with Pascal, I'm grateful to Nectara for inviting me to do this. I am always available for more contact. This is my favorite subject in the world. And Corey, if you ever want to connect, I'm not planning on getting to Prince George soon, but I'm doing a little bit of a cross-country thing. So I try
to get out of Prince George as often
as
possible.
There you go. So please, any of you, all of you, whatever I can do for you and however I can do it, please reach out. Pascal, what were you going to say?
Is there an email that people can reach out to you if they have?
Sure. Hello.
Or anything around death planning or
life planning.
Life planning.
Prentice.ca. Hello at deathsapprentice.ca. And I chose hello because it was friendly instead of like info. I just wanted everybody to be talking about death.
And if anyone's interested in end of life doula training, Elaine's taking.
I'm taking one with the Institute of Traditional Medicine in Toronto, but there's also a really good one in Douglas College. Krista is a great resource for that sort of thing too.
Mhm.
So do ask.
I'm often a guest lecturer in the Douglas one too. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank
well,
you.
thank
Have a great
you.
Sunday, and
What a
we'll see you
wonderful
again.
day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you so much.